Welcome to the April 21st meeting of the Town Council of Los Gatos. We're excited tonight to be able to welcome by video our other council members, so that's exciting. Some of us are in the room here in council chambers. You notice that tonight we're not wearing masks because there's 4 of us here and we're all about 20 feet away from each other. So in order to be audible, hopefully, we are not using the mask this evening. Let's start with a roll call.
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Sayak.
Here.
Councilmember Rennie.
Here.
Vice Mayor Spector.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Jensen.
Here. And as we've done for the past couple of meetings, we have council and manager matters, and I'm going to start with our town manager, Ms. Pravetti.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Town Council. The town continues to be very actively engaged in the COVID-19 emergency. We continuously update our website. It's a great resource for residents and businesses to find resources, to find ways to help others, to volunteer, and to donate. In terms of town services, last week we recently added a new service in our planning and building arena where we are now accepting online applications. Please go to the website for more information. This is really important because it enables our town to be positioned well as the order might be modified in the near future. In addition, our parks and trails are open. We just remind folks to please keep the 6 to 10 feet distance between your parties, so that way we can keep our parks open for enjoyment. And then our library continues to do really innovative programming, Facebook Live story times. We had an online book club last week. So please stay tuned to how we are delivering services in a new and different way in this era. Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Pravetti. I'll start with the Vice Mayor. Do you have anything to report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of things. First of all, West Valley Sanitation District, clearly an essential business, had a board meeting about a week ago where the most significant thing we did was approve the budget for this service. I continue to participate in the county's and Dr. Sarah Cody's updates on the COVID virus. And I continue, along with my husband, to appreciate and use pickup and delivery from all over the town for our restaurants. So thank you all.
And thank you very much for your support of our local businesses and restaurants. Councilwoman Sayak.
Thank you. As all the council is aware, there are significant interest in ensuring that local cities gather some reimbursement under the CARES Act that's happening at a federal level. So the League of Cities is participating in those conversations, and I've been participating on the town's behalf.
Thank you, Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. Since our last meeting, LAFCO met versus video, nothing of too much interest to report. VTA board also had a special meeting where we discussed phase 2 of bringing BART into downtown. To my surprise, we actually made some headway there. We had disagreements with BART about a cut and cover, which would be disruptive. They wanted the dual tunnels that would occur if you did a cut and cover, but you'd have Santa Clara Street torn up for 4 years versus a single bore tunnel where the trains stack, and BART doesn't like that because they're not used to it. We came up with, and so what they wanted us to go to a much larger single bore that doesn't need the cut and cover, but would cost about $4 billion additional to the current budget. And there's no contractors that we could get to even bid it. So we came up with a compromise where we would do a cut and cover on the first station, kind of the ends of downtown, and then we would still do the smaller single bore size in the middle of downtown. So it's very exciting that we now have a plausible solution that BART seems to be in agreement with. So that's exciting for VTA. I also our last council meeting, we gave an additional money to one of our nonprofits supporting people in our community, West Valley Community Services. I have also, in donating my time, I'm now delivering for them food on Thursdays so that older people don't have to leave their homes, or people that just need additional help with food. So I'm doing my own volunteering there. That's it.
Thank you very much. The only thing I have to report is that myself and town staff are constantly working behind the scenes to react to orders, to react to information that we get from our community, to react to suggestions, to try to make these meetings a little bit more interactive. We're happy to have some video this evening, and if we have to go forward with video meetings in the future, I think that we'll be able to include participation from the public, hopefully. Can't guarantee that yet. But please check on the town website, as Ms. Pravetti said. I'm trying to get a message to the community each week. I'm also participating in the meetings with County Health. And this Thursday, there will be a virtual town hall meeting with myself and Ms. Pravetti at 11:30 a.m. We encourage you to sign up and participate. We'll be taking questions and giving updates regarding what the town is doing. You can either go to the town website to find information about that, losgatosca.gov, or you can go to the Los Gatos Chamber of Commerce website for information. That's this Thursday, April 23rd at 11:30. And with that, we will go to consent items. We have 13 matters on our consent calendar this evening. And we did, Council, just want to acknowledge that there were some desk items regarding questions or observations about those matters. We did not receive, except for on item 13, we did receive one communication from Mr. Shepherdson that is not pertinent to the question before us this evening, but is a question about future equipment that might be at a fire station should this sale go through. So given that explanation, does anyone wish to pull a consent matter from the calendar? Seeing no one, is there a motion? Councilwoman Seah, move for approval.
I'll move to approve items in the consent calendar.
And is there a second? Councilman Rennie?
Second.
Thank you, and we'll do a roll call. Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Councilwoman Seah?
Yes.
Councilman Rennie?
Yes.
And the mayor votes yes, it passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Which brings us to item 14, which is the first, well, actually, I'm sorry, it brings us to verbal communications. We actually did receive a verbal communications tonight. It came in within the deadline, as I think all of you know, might be watching on TV. We've modified our procedure to receive communications and ask that they be written. We have received some that I'll review for the individual items this evening, but because verbal communications doesn't really have a particular item to be assigned to, because we did receive it within the time period, I'm just going to mention the name of the person that we got it from and summarize for you the contents. We got a verbal communication, which is something not on our regular agenda, from Kira Barston, who says that she has lived in Los Gatos for her entire life and her father owns a small business here. She is strongly urging the council to go beyond the current residential moratorium that we have on evictions and go to rent freezes for residential and county. Then independently of that, she asked the council to approach Netflix, who, as you all know, has its headquarters here in Los Gatos, to provide some financial assistance to the town. And Ms. Barston and members of the council, I will let you know that Ms. Pravetti and I have attempted to approach Netflix. We have asked to be on the CEO's calendar. We have received no response. So if someone's interested in pursuing that in the community, you might let Netflix know. So that's our verbal communication, which brings us to item 14, which is a consideration of authorizing the town manager to execute an amendment of our lease agreement with the new Museum of Los Gatos. And Mr. Schultz?
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. Los Gatos Museum Association, also known as New Museum Los Gatos, or NUMU, and staff have been discussing renegotiating their lease agreement to minimize or eliminate utility and rent obligations. In exchange for the elimination of utilities, NUMU is willing to accelerate rent payments, provide in-kind services for residents of Los Gatos, and reconfigure the lower level of their staff office area for use for town employees only. The lease agreement requires NUMU to, the current lease agreement requires NUMU to pay base rent with an annual increase. Currently, it is paying $4,354 per year, and that amount will increase to $24,000 in 2026. In addition, the current lease agreement requires NUMU to pay a pro rata share of the utilities based on their square footage. NUMU's average monthly utility invoice is $4,200 per month, or I'm sorry, yeah, $4,200 per month and approximately $50,000 per year. Based upon Town Council's direction in closed session, the proposed amendment to the lease would eliminate the payment of utilities and instead require NUMU to begin making monthly rental payments of $2,083 beginning July 1, or $25,000 per year. NUMU has also requested that certain conditions of their CUP be eliminated or amended in order to facilitate additional revenue generating programming. The conditions relate to hours of operation, the number of private events, the number of attendees, and the number of staff allowed on site. According to the NUMU executive director, these conditions are erroneous and make it difficult to generate revenue for the museum. The proposed amended condition use permit eliminates or amends these conditions. That ends my staff report, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. As I did earlier in our OPEB meeting, I am going to just summarize the fact for our public portion of the hearing that we did receive communications, which I'm assuming that council received as well and read, and are part of our staff report and posted on the website if anyone wishes to see, from Barney Davidge, Catherine Summers, and Heidi Owens, all in support of item 14. So with that, are there questions of Mr. Schultz from any member of the council? You can raise your hand and I'll recognize you. Seeing none, is there a motion? Councilwoman Sayoc.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Schultz and staff for working on this. I know council has been working diligently to work with NUMU to ensure an equitable contract agreement, so thank you. So with this motion, I authorize the town manager to execute an amendment to the lease agreement with the Los Gatos Museum Association and approve amendments to their conditional use permit to eliminate or amend certain conditions as contained in item 14 in our staff report.
Thank you. Is there a second? Mr. Rennie.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Any comments or questions on the motion? Seeing none, a roll call vote. Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Councilwoman Sayoc?
Yes.
Councilman Rennie?
Yes.
And the mayor votes yes. It passes unanimously. Which brings us to item 15, which is a proposal for amendments to our special events ordinance. This is another aspect of the town's continuing effort to streamline different ordinances and regulations in town to make it easier, a little bit easier for our downtown businesses to operate. Given that, our report is going to be given by our Economic Vitality Director, Monica Wren. Ms. Wren?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you this evening are the recommendations to the town code related to special events. As we've outlined in the report, event staff has been working closely with our town colleagues and our event stakeholders to develop special event process that is fair, transparent, and efficient. Through this work and through the process improvement, staff recommends that the code be amended to reduce the lead time that's required for applicants, as well as adjust some of the code language around that to make it possible. If this is approved tonight, staff looks forward to the opportunity to be more flexible as we move out of this COVID situation and restore more opportunities for the community to celebrate together at events. Staff's here to answer any questions you may have tonight.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wren. For our public comment, we did receive emails from Randy Chen of the Los Gatos Chamber of Commerce, Terry Hope of the Coffee Roasting Company, and Heidi Owens, all generally in support of the amendments that are proposed this evening. Given that, are there questions for Ms. Wren from the council? I do not see any. And again, look for a motion. Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll go ahead and make the motion to follow staff's recommendation to modify the ordinance and do a reading by title only of the Town Code of Chapter 14, Article 10 for special events. And I'd also like to thank staff for their efforts to continue to streamline our processes. I'm impressed and glad that this hasn't been in effect very long, and we've circled back and made improvements already in the ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Rennie. Is there a second? Second by Councilwoman Sayak. Any comments that go with your second?
No, I'm seconding it for all the reasons that Councilmember Rennie said, and hope that when appropriate, we use this with a celebration.
Well, I think we're all hoping for the same thing when appropriate. Any other comments or questions on the motion before I call the question? Seeing none, Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Councilwoman Sayak?
Yes.
Councilman Rennie?
Yes.
And the mayor votes yes. It passes unanimously. Ms. Neese, will you read the title, please?
An ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Los Gatos amending Town Code Chapter 14, Article 10, Special Events.
Thank you, which moves us to item 16. This is a matter regarding our school bus pilot program and financing and contract obligations that the council is being asked to reconsider given the COVID-19 situation. Mr. Morley will be presenting our staff report. Mr. Morley?
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor and Council.
And can you talk a little louder, or you're hard to hear?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you. Hopefully this is a little bit better. On March 3rd, you directed us to continue service for next year with our school bus program, and we've begun the discussions with the vendor about that. Right after that direction, you saw that we started with the COVID-19 challenges and ended service on the 13th with the last day of school effective for the school year. The vendor and town staff are worried about the ability to retain continuity with the program into next year, given the challenges that we've seen with a lack of vendors providing service, and also with a difficulty in obtaining drivers for the service. So we wanted to bring for you the opportunity to have a discussion about what we might do between now and next year for this particular service. If we wanted to retain and continue to pay the school bus company, Student Transportation of America, to provide to ensure that provide some assurance that we have a service for the next school year when we get there. So they've provided a letter with their requests as well in that particular direction. And we have a couple of questions that we've outlined within the body of the report for your consideration, and we're hoping for some direction to move us forward as we look at negotiations for next year and look at the program for next year. And that concludes my report, and I'm here for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Morley. Council, those points that Mr. Morley is referring to are on page 2 of the staff report, the bullet points at the bottom of the page. For the public comment section, we did receive one email from Heidi Owens. It contains a discussion of the various issues we'll be talking about in the bullet points, but defers to the discretion of the council in ultimately making a decision on this matter. With that, are there questions for Mr. Morley? Okay, I'll get back to you, Mr. Rennie. I didn't see your hand up before I was going to start. Mr. Morley, my question is that we can anticipate, I imagine, that school may look very different as we begin next year than it has in the past with our pilot program. We could have staggered days, we could have different classes. Is this something we should be considering in the questions we have before us now, or are we just wanting to keep a service in place no matter what the school year actually ends up looking like?
So I think with many things with COVID, it's been a day-to-day change, and we've been adapting as things change and making the best of the situation. We don't know, as we highlighted in the report, that we'll even have school in August when school is due to resume. So we may have a lag in between the start of bus service, and it may be some time we don't know at this point. We wanted to get your feel, the council's feel on where we should be going. Our recommendation is to negotiate an agreement, so we would be looking for any input you have along the way on what we should include in those negotiations as we look to lock this service in for the future.
Thank you. And would it be helpful to you, Mr. Morley, and to the staff who's here, in looking at the bullet points on our staff report? There are 4. Do you want us to discuss those individually, or would you rather that each council person talk about them, or would you rather that there be a motion regarding your recommendation? How would you like us to proceed?
Ultimately, we're looking for a motion specific to the recommendation. The bullets are highlighting some of the thoughts that we had along the way, and we're hoping that you can provide your insight on those bullet points as well to help us as we're moving forward. So it gives us a little bit more focus as we're discussing this with the school bus company.
So for people who may actually be watching this, rather than take the council people off the screen, I'm just going to summarize what those bullets are. The first is, should the town negotiate with the person that provides the bus services on partial payments, or should we tell them that we don't want to pay at all because there's no school? If we make partial payments, should those payments be used only to keep drivers on payroll? Should the payments, if we make payments as a town, be used or not used, as the case may be, as the council wishes, for administrative costs? And if the school year is delayed, does council have any other direction? But again, I think the chief question before us is, do we want to authorize the town manager to negotiate and execute an agreement or an amendment to the agreement that we currently have with the bus company? That said, I'm looking for questions from council or a motion. Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question on bullet number 3. So someplace in the report, this busing company, it says it's actually headquartered out of state, and bullet number 3 implies that we, or all the bullets taken together imply that we might do something like say, yes, we'd like to have partial payments that reach the drivers, but we don't want to pay the administrative costs. But I want to understand, are these local administrative costs, or if we were paying administrative costs, is the money all going out of state? That wasn't exactly clear.
Thank you for the question. So the company is indeed based out of state, but the portion of the company that serves us is based in San Jose. They have a corporation yard there where they run their buses. At that yard, they have administrative staff. They have bus mechanics. They house their buses there, and their drivers report there. They do their scheduling there, so they have a full load of work that they do there for the service that they provide in the Bay Area. So that was the main focus of that bullet point. There are, of course, with any business, there is that overhead cost above and beyond that that would be tacked on, that would cover their administrative costs up through the organization in their business model.
Thank you.
Other questions, Vice Mayor?
In reading the staff report, I personally had a disconnect between what is possible and what might be realistic. If we assume, for example, that we don't know when the school year will begin again and what form that will take, but then in reading the report and the letter, it sounded as though the town might possibly lose or could lose drivers. So in giving my consideration, I needed a more more input from staff as to realistically what are we looking at here as far as our options.
Thank you. So let me start with the current school year and that request. So the current request is that and what we're looking for, the primary guidance from council, the initial guidance is what we do between March and June of this year. So right now there is no busing being provided. Do we want to provide continue to pay on our contract with the busing company to help to ensure that they stay viable and can provide us service in the future? They would retain employees that are currently laid off. They would bring them back on payroll and pay them not to drive, so that we would have a better opportunity for having bus drivers in the fall. And so that was the number one question: is do we want to do that? Do we want to do it for more than drivers? Do we want to do it also for their administrative staff, their mechanics? At what level of service do we want to do that? The ask from the bus company is that we do it up to the point of our contract amount minus any savings we might have from operations. So the example in the agreement, in the staff report, is we will have savings from fuel, obviously, because the buses aren't running. So do we want to pay for everything but fuel in order to ensure that we have a viable company that can provide us service in the fall again, or whenever that happens to come around? And I think your guidance on that will help us into what we look for next year. And maybe that's the second question: is do we want to continue that into the fall, or is that something that if school doesn't go back into session in the fall, you want us to come back and talk to you again? So the immediate question is right now, because we're under contract, and then the follow-up would be in the fall, because we're negotiating that contract now as well.
Thank you, and that helped. It wasn't clear to me from the staff report, so I'll just ask. Let's say we follow through with our March through June portion of our obligation. Does that, if we did that, would we have the absolute right to have the bus go forward in the coming year in some form, or would that just keep our foot in the door but not buy us really any givens?
We would ask for a firm commitment from the busing company, but there's some things that are out of our control, and if they're not providing busing for any school in the Bay Area because no schools are in service, it could be possible that they fold up their operation here. So there's some things, as with what we're experiencing broadly with the COVID-19 experience in general, there's some things that we just can't control, and so we'd have to play a little bit by ear.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Sayak, did you have a question?
Yes. So I guess the question of just to Director Morley. So as you commented, we don't know what next year will look like. And my concern is, I guess it's a comment and a question. Given that we don't know how the school will proceed, there's conversations about staggered schedules, different days. We may even have to alter bus routes because those that have subscribed for next year may not be on the same bus route and bus day that we anticipate. So I'm making that assumption. I need you to clarify that if that's correct. And the question is, if this were a traditional year, when would you and staff be collecting payment and contract agreements with families to actually ride on the buses?
So ideally, we would be doing that now. We've already pushed it off towards for the end of the year. We may likely be doing that over the course of the summer this year, which is a little bit of a handicap for us in getting signups, but probably necessary. And there's a lot of unknowns with this. We don't know what the routes are necessarily going to be, what schedule kids are going to be on. We also don't know if parents are going to be comfortable putting their kids on a bus, which is a little bit more of a confined space than their family vehicle. So there's a bunch of unknowns here that we're dealing with. Like I said before, we continue to deal with unknowns and work through them, and we're comfortable doing that. It may not be the same service that we had anticipated. We've already struggled with this, as you know, and that's the point of the conversation tonight.
Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Yet. I guess two more follow-up. So there's no guarantee if we pay them that they won't fold up and not be available anyway, correct?
That's true.
And then the second, I guess it's kind of a question. I'm trying to think how to word it. Maybe come back to me.
Okay. I'm going to ask a question, excuse me, of Mr. Morley. I'm assuming that the monies that we would use to pay March to June are monies that are already allocated in our budget for this year, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Mr. Rennie, have you thought of your question? Yes, you have. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I'm still trying to figure out how to word it, but the idea is we're worried about making sure the drivers stay because we've been in a world of a very tight labor market. Now we know there's a lot of temporary unemployment and a lot of that might stay longer. In our pension OPEB, there was a mention that this may not be a V recession, it might look more like a U. With that in mind, there may become more, it seems like there would become more labor available to get drivers. Potentially they'd have to be trained, but we wouldn't be in the same labor market that we were before. So is this really that important to keep the drivers around?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's it goes into that unknown category. The ideal would be that we would slide right into next year and everything would be good. We just don't know. We out of an abundance of caution, we wanted to have the conversation with you. There's other factors like we are a small client for the bus company. So where do we fit in terms of their service model? And what are the expenses associated with that, and is there an opportunity for us to continue to provide some assurance of continuity of this service?
Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to start with a comment. It's not a motion, but we'll see. So my comment is that at least from my personal perspective, what I've wanted us to do as a town is to model behavior that we want others to follow. So for example, held a special meeting to put a moratorium on residential evictions right away. Donated money to our service clubs. Today streamlined various procedures for our business community and also forgave rent for our own tenants. And another thing that I'd like to model as a town is that to the extent we can support those businesses that we use, that we value, and to have their workers have some security, and if that ability is budgeted already and we're not losing money, I would like us to do that, assuming that when we know more in the fall about what school will look like, whether there'll be school, when school will be, and whether this company is in business, all of those questions will be on the table, I assume, for some renegotiation if we follow the recommendation, which is essentially to negotiate a new agreement. But so if my personal goal is for us to model behavior that I'd like others to follow, then I would like the town to meet its contract obligation to this company. Other comments, questions, or a motion? Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with what you say in principle, and I've been thinking that we're kind of all in this together, but the town also is going to be looking at budget shortfalls, revenue shortfalls, and tight budgets. I think you're right. We should provide some relief to them, some payment, but shouldn't we look for a compromise position because we're not made of money either? Rather than paying the entire contract amount, negotiate for a partial payment. Wouldn't that make more sense?
So that's exactly why my comment was not a motion. So thank you for your comment. Councilwoman Sayak, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. And so a couple comments. And this is a difficult one in that there's no obvious right answer. So I'm just going to give a couple of points similar to what you did. I appreciate the modeling factor that that you brought forward, and I very much am in favor of that. What I would ask of staff, though, is given that this is a large, well, I don't know how large a company this is there an ability to ensure that the drivers that we have been using are the ones that are going to get paid? And is there an ability to basically encourage them also that to find more employment, better employment that can be guaranteed? My concern is we don't know what next year will look like, and if we don't know what next year looks like, we don't know what that company will look like. I don't want to string along any employees to think that there's guaranteed employment, but I also want to be able to pay out this contract to give them time to look for more secure employment. So if there's a way we can marry the two, I don't even know if we can track that the drivers that we have been using are the same ones that will be receiving this. So that's the first question of staff.
Yes, the answer to your question is we can require them to provide us certified payroll that shows who has been paid on our contract and where those dollars have been going. So we can track to the employee.
And then the follow up to that is, if let's say driver X decides and finds a better job, is there an ability to basically stop paying if that driver X finds a job between now and June?
So that if that's what the council wants to direct us, we'll work that language into the amendment.
Okay.
And Mr. Schultz actually has a comment on that. Mr. Schultz?
Yes, my question was, yes, we can absolutely word that into the amendment.
Other comments or questions? Or a motion at this point? Councilwoman Sayak?
And then this is for, again, Director Morley, because we are in an unusual time and we don't know what next year will look like. How do you even begin to negotiate what that contract will look like? I mean, there's one issue of paying employees to finish out this year, which I support, but I don't feel comfortable engaging in a new contract with so many unknowns.
Yeah,
and when does that decision have to be made?
We'll have to work through that with the busing company to make sure that we'll have to adjust our language in the agreement to provide us ample outs for, along the way. That will come at a cost, I assume, for them as well. They'll have infrastructure costs up front. So there may be the funds that are lost by us in order to reserve the ability to have busing service, but potentially not an entire year's worth of service, so that we can have some savings should, for instance, we not have busing at all next year.
And Mayor, if I may just add that the item before the council is an amendment to the existing agreement. We're not negotiating all of the terms. We're really just trying to focus on how we finish out this fiscal year and then any stipulations that might go with a partial or full payment. So again, the main agreement would still stand, so that way we would know that we would have the services for the fall. And as Director Morley said, given so many unknowns, we would likely need to come back to you in late summer to get further direction just because of our changing environment. And at that time, we may need a further amendment to the contract at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Peretti. And I guess my follow-up procedural question to you is, the way the staff report is worded for our recommendation, it asks us to, let's see, authorize the town manager to negotiate and execute an amendment. So I realize that we are talking only about a payment stipulation for March through June, but in looking at the language, I'm expecting that that's a subject of negotiation and that those bullet points would be issues in the negotiation. Is that correct?
That's correct, and if it gives the council more comfort, what we could do is have the negotiation and then bring back the actual amendment for your concurrence prior to execution.
Okay, with that, are there any other further questions, discussion, comments, or a motion? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to jump in. Make a motion that we authorize the town manager to negotiate an amendment to the agreement with Santa Barbara Transportation Corporation for a busing. However, that we leave out the execute portion of that, and that whatever negotiated amendment is reached comes back to the council for us to look at and approve before it's executed. Vice Mayor.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Comments, questions on the motion? Councilwoman Sayoc?
I'll support the motion with the understanding that this is it's budgeted already and that these funds will go strictly to those drivers that are driving our students back and forth, and that there's no guarantee that we will even resume a contract with them given the unknowns for next year.
Okay, thank you. And I'll clarify, my motion is that what I anticipate is that the particular portion of the contract that Ms. Pavetti referred us to would be the subject of a negotiation for potential amendment, and that before that we even entered into that amendment and executed it, that whatever the terms of the negotiated agreement were, assuming that there are any, comes back to the council prior to execution. So with that, that's your understanding, Vice Mayor, with this, for the second?
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on the motion? Okay, I'll make a roll call then on the motion, Vice Mayor.
Yes.
Councilwoman Sayoc?
Yes?
Councilman Rennie?
Yes.
And the mayor votes yes, so it passes unanimously. And that's the last item on our agenda tonight. Thank you all very much for being here, and for any of you who are actually watching, thank you for watching. And look for updates on the town's website all the time on coronavirus. There is another call with County Health on Wednesday, so hopefully we'll get some updates. And the town is always in communication with Office of Emergency Services on any changes that might be made, but right now we simply don't know if there are any changes, but hopefully there'll be some updates by Wednesday. So thank you very much and good night.